first of all, Israel's the size of New Jersey. So the America is a continent, right? So it's going to be a lot harder to build an Iron Dome.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today we're speaking to political strategist David Grasso, who's going to talk us through this war of words between Colombia's president and Donald Trump over whether Colombia would accept these repatriated flights from the US, which were filled with hundreds of illegal migrants that had been found in the United States. And he finally said yes, he would take them after Donald Trump was strong-arming him with 25% tariffs. And we know that these tariffs threats are the way Donald Trump gets things done. We're also going to speak about his desire to buy Greenland, even though Denmark said no, it's not for sale. And the big story of today is Donald Trump officially commissioning an Iron Dome to be built over the United States. He told his Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth he's got 60 days to come up with a plan. They're actually going to do this. They're going to make an Iron Dome like the one they have in Israel. David Grasso, independent political strategist, thank you for your time today. We have to, of course, dive straight into this kind of war of words or potential trade war that was going to erupt between Donald Trump and Colombia's president that they've seemed to diffuse basically through Trump's strong-arming of saying, I'll hit you with 25% tariffs if you don't accept these two big military aircrafts of migrants that we're going to drop on your doorstep. What did you make of this that unfolded over the weekend?
Well, it was shocking, of course, and I went out and bought Colombian flowers. Of course, coffee and flowers are Colombia's largest exports to the United States. You know, I think your audience has to remember that this didn't happen in a vacuum. Gustavo Petro was a former guerrilla fighter for the left, a Marxist guerrilla. So clearly him and Donald Trump are not going to be the best ideological fit with each other. So if you look at their exchanges on X, and what Trump said on Truth Social, you know, President Petro called Trump a white slaver, and Trump called him a, you know, deeply committed socialist or some other thing. So you have to understand there's a huge ideological wedge here. And really what I think this whole episode has shown, regardless of the drama, is that it's a new era for America and for the Americas, we'll call it. You know, they can't really take on Trump directly without having immediate and scary consequences for their economy, for migration, for their own interests, etc.
You really know it's 2025 when you've got two world leaders going at each other on Twitter. But David, the Trump administration have made it pretty clear that they basically want to start expelling illegal migrants from the United States. They say that it is because it is a national security risk, and they've started with these Colombian migrants, as I mentioned, putting them on these military aircrafts and sending them back to their home country. Why do you think the Trump administration are labeling this as a national security risk?
So immigration, as you all well know in the UK, is a complicated topic. It's like education and healthcare, right? It doesn't make for a great multimedia topic. So let's dive into this slowly. What the Trump administration is doing is they are prioritizing deporting people with criminal records, right? And that is what they are doing first. So that's what we're seeing here. And if you look at the polling, most people are for that. Even someone like me, who comes from a political refugee background, my whole family, they're political refugees from Cuba, right? My husband is a foreign national. And basically we could all agree that, you know, if you have a criminal record, you should probably be deported. And there have been very sad cases in the United States of people dying and being victims of crime from people who are criminals. And most Americans want to see that happen. Now, of course, this conflicts with some realities, like immigrants commit crime at a much lower rate than native-born people like me. So again, in the Trump world, there's a little piece of reality, stuff that's popular, stuff that's common sense, that butts up with some uncomfortable realities that really don't match the actual conditions on the ground here in the United States.
What do you make of concerns that this conflict between the United States and Colombia will result in Colombia turning to China or China turning to Colombia and saying, look, you're not going to get much from out of the United States and we'll financially take care of you?
Well, the conflict with Colombia has de-escalated, right? But it's going to pop up again. So whether it's Colombia or, any of these other countries in the Americas. Here's the thing. China is not an ideal stand-in for the United States, specifically in Colombia's case, because Colombia's largest trading partner is the United States. And while China is the largest trading partner in many South American countries, it's not the same. They don't have a diaspora community. China makes their loans in US dollars with adjustable interest rates. It's basically like a payday loan. It's not like getting a loan from a multilateral institution that Western countries like the United Kingdom and America back. So yeah, sure, they're going to turn to China, but that was already happening. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. A lot of these countries turn both to America and China. And while yes, it is a concern that this will, incentivize people to turn more to China, someone like President Petro, who already hated the United States, this really didn't change his mind. He was never going to have good relations with the United States. And Colombia will not have good and productive relations until they have someone in charge who is not him.
David, Trump's new border czar, Tom Homan, we know he's been very strict, and he already had a plan in place before they were inaugurated, saying he was going to crack down on illegal migration. But he recently said that he has several countries lining up willing to take nationals from any country for us. If we can't move them one place, we'll have them somewhere else. We'll basically put them somewhere else, which means that there are countries willing to basically fall in line for Donald Trump. How far do you think Trump will take, exuding this power and dominance over other countries, especially with this so many threats of placing tariffs on them?
Yeah, and I want to put a little asterisk here, right? Here in the Americas, we have a lot of cultural homogeneity. I speak both Spanish and Portuguese and a little bit of French. And basically, besides Suriname, where they speak Dutch, I can wander the whole continent. We are not like Europe, right? So let's say you deport someone to a country that is not theirs. They're likely in a country that's very culturally similar. So this is why this is happening. How far this will be taken by the Trump administration, the clear answer is nobody knows. If you read liberal media, they'll tell you this is a made for reality TV multimedia special, that they're just showing Americans that they're deporting criminals, and then they'll hang the whole mission accomplished thing. But the real answer here is we don't really know, and that's really, we need to wait and see. There will come a certain point that there is economic damage in Western countries, including the United Kingdom and the United States. Our birth rate is too low to replace our native-born population. We need immigration in order to sustain our economies and our social safety net, including retiree benefits. So these are long-term problems that we will all have to contend with. And every now and then, sentiment, like we've seen in Europe and here in the Americas, bubble up against immigration. The bottom line is we need immigration, we need efficient immigration, and really this isn't a long-term solution. We have to have difficult conversations about the future of our country, the future of our economy, and what we're going to do to balance rule of law, the laws on the books, and our economic needs.
How successful do you think that Donald Trump's administration will be in deploying all those active troops to the border? They're sending about 1,500 troops already to basically stand at the border and deter migrants from coming through. You and I both know under the Biden administration, there was about 1 million migrants that were encountered at that border, an estimated 1 million gotaways that we won't be accounting for because they weren't actually, seen by Border Patrol agents. On average, since the 2024-2025 fiscal year, there's been about 3,500 migrants spotted at the border every single day. So I wonder how this kind of new method to the Trump administration's tackling of the immigration crisis will work.
Yeah, I'm also very curious, and it's very interesting to know as well that we have a northern border. The largest unprotected border in the world is with Canada, right? We tend to overly focus on our southern border, but Canada is also a border as well. Nobody really knows. I've been to the border many times. In fact, I crossed the border last week from San Diego into Tijuana. It's very fortified, but it's also the busiest border crossing in the world. The San Ysidro port of entry between San Diego and Tijuana is the most traversed border in the world, as is the border between El Paso, Texas and Juarez, Mexico. We have deep economic and cultural relationships. Remember, that part of the United States used to be part of Mexico, and for many people, the border changed on them. People like Eva Longoria's family. Eva Longoria's talked a lot about her experience where the border changed on her own family instead of them migrating. These are deep issues. We all know, and it's an open secret, the first thing you learn when you go to El Paso is I have a friend who lives on the mountain. They point that way and they go, see that part of the border? It's unprotected. And that's where, drugs and human trafficking occur. So will additional troops on the border help? I imagine yes, but it does not solve the longstanding issues that we have. The income differentials between Latin America and the United States at a single border are something we don't really see a lot. Or maybe perhaps between Spain and Morocco and Turkey and Bulgaria, right? Or Turkey and Iraq. But when you have those income differentials and you have demand for undocumented labor really through the US business sector, those are really tough to solve. And that's not something that 1,500 troops can solve overnight, but I'm sure it's a start.
And more of a intimidating look, I guess, for migrants who have felt, I guess, comfortable crossing the border in the last few years. But David, Donald Trump has spent the first 8 days of his presidency basically trying to flex his dominance over world leaders, trying to be this number one guy that can solve these wars, that can stick up to the big bullies of Putin or Xi Jinping. He's already spoken to Xi Jinping. He said that he's trying to speak to Putin about ending the war in Ukraine and brokering a deal between him and Zelensky, but he's also said that he wants to buy Greenland, and he's had a reported fiery conversation with the Prime Minister of Denmark about why he should buy it, which apparently ended in a bit of a confrontational way. I want your thoughts on why he is so adamant that he should be buying Greenland off Denmark, even though they've said it's not for sale.
Well, geostrategically, Greenland's going to be very important, especially as climate change occurs. The Arctic will probably experience a lot more ice-free days, and a lot of transport and military protection will focus north. So that's the reasoning behind it. The actual strategy behind it is he believes that really fundamentally, if we look at it from a colonialist point of view, we should probably ask the Greenlandic people what they want. Denmark has a pretty ugly history in Greenland. They sterilized women, they repressed their language. We know the story of colonialization. So whether exactly that's a good idea for the United States or for the Greenlandic people or for the Danes for that matter, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder in that one. I think from a US point of view, what I would want to see is that China had no involvement whatsoever in Greenland, because remember, in the north, we're already dealing with the Russians and to a certain point, the Chinese. And second of all, that we had unfettered access militarily. The China was not involved economically. And basically, in many cases, we already have that because Denmark is, of course, a NATO country. So as long as that is maintained, I don't see a problem with what the current arrangement. But it does make for a nice pithy talking point that my uncles like to emphasize when we go out to dinner.
And in a not so similar sentiment, he's kind of doing a similar thing, I guess, with Canada. He's saying that Canada should be the 51st state of the United States. It's obviously a lot bigger than a state. It's a huge country, and a huge sovereign country. For that matter, what do you think Donald Trump is doing here? Is it just another flex on world leaders to say that I am the number one guy, I can basically do anything that I want?
I don't even think it's that. One of the things over here, and I think you guys have a similar history in the UK, like divided Ireland, right? Why is Northern Ireland still part of the UK and the rest of Ireland its own country? There are some historical oddities as to why Canada is not part of the United States. The same way that while we annexed half of Mexico, we probably could have annexed more, including Baja California, but it got left on the negotiating table. In fact, when people got back, we were surprised we didn't get Baja California. There are a lot of historical oddities. And if you know anything about the US and Canada, if I wake up in Canada, I don't know I'm in a different country. We are the same. So I think there's this idea that, it would make more sense if we were one economic union, but that kind of crashes against the reality. They did polling in every province, and only about 20% of people, even the French Canadians, funny enough, the French Canadians voted the same way that the Anglo Canadians did. About 80% want to remain their own country. So that probably needs to remain off the table.
Trump said on Monday that he was directing his newly appointed Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth to orchestrate within 60 days a plan to implement a Iron Dome in America, the same one that they helped build in Israel. That's been quite successful. It's been in there since 2011, and Donald Trump basically said if Israel has one, why shouldn't why shouldn't the US have one? They're protecting other people. Why can't they protect themselves? Can you walk me through this pledge from the president?
Yeah, well, first of all, Israel's the size of New Jersey, so America is a continent, right? So it's going to be a lot harder to build an Iron Dome. And in Israel, they have a very specific issue of proximity close to many enemy groups, including Hezbollah and Hamas over in the Gaza Strip, as well as other rogue groups, Iran, which isn't too far, and the Houthis over in Yemen, and these are all within missile striking distance. The United States and the Americas does not have that problem. I think that it's very interesting that he's bringing up the concept of an Iron Dome, that the technology, which is very powerful to keep our country safe, but it's not a very neat comparison. Israel is tiny. For anyone who's been to Israel and the Palestinian territories, it's probably always lost in translation of how tiny the area is. It is so tiny when you are standing in Israel looking into Gaza, you can see Egypt in the distance. So I don't know if this is the neatest comparison, but it's a very interesting idea, and I don't think it's a bad idea to employ some of the technology that we've seen successful in Israel here in the United States.
And it took 4 years to build the one to cover Israel. So I wonder how long it would even take to cover the United States. But David, what does it say about the president basically saying that we need to protect the country, the entire country, with an Iron Dome? Does it say that the US needs this sort of infrastructure and investment and technology to stay safe?
I think you said it better than I could have. Yeah, and I think there's this general sentiment toward all technology, right? Whether you're looking at AI, whether you're looking at defense, whether you're looking at industrial capacity, there's this idea that we need to invest more of our resources at home. It's kind of this central thesis of the America First policy. And I think it kind of feeds into that narrative, right? Like, we have the capability to do X, why aren't we doing it at home? Now, whether that's actually politically possible is anyone's guess, but I understand the ethos of what the president is saying, if that's helpful.
Well, do you think that Americans want an Iron Dome in the US after helping to fund and build the one in Israel?
Yes, of course. I mean, if it's possible, if it's technologically possible, I'd love one. I mean, the Iron Dome has kept countless people safe, including Palestinians living in Israel. So the Iron Dome is an amazing technology. Now, whether you can cover an area smaller than New Jersey and then make it, continent wide to cover the whole the whole United States, it's quite a scale up that I imagine my colleagues over in defense commentary would probably tell you is not going to happen anytime soon.
And take definitely more than 4 years. David Grasso, thank you so much for your time today.
Always a challenge in these times, but trying our best out here.